In order to enter service, a vehicle should go into production first. Sounds obvious, right? Well, that's the stage that a lot of really interesting and promising designs failed to pass, due to all sorts of reasons, while other designs not only entered production, but also managed to remain relevant for decades. Today, we're going to discuss vehicles belonging to the latter category, the most produced tanks of War Thunder, the legendary T-72, the T-34, the Sherman, and many others. Let's start with the American M60, the first MBT to enter service in the US. Counting all the variants from the early M60A1 to the highly advanced Starship, armed with a complex missile system, around 15,000 of those tanks were made in total. The M60 was designed to be easily upgraded, allowing it and its variations to remain in service for more than 3 decades. Then we have the Soviet T34 Medium tank, with 20,000 vehicles. This tank was pretty cheap to make and relatively easy to maintain, while also boasting quite a few advanced features for its time, of course. Tanks of this type were used by the Red Army for several decades as well, and also saw service in Cuba, Bulgaria, Egypt, and many other countries. After that, another American vehicle, the M3 light tank. If we take into account its upgraded version, the M5, around 22,000 of those tanks left the factory floor at one point or another. Those were really reliable as well, but the M3 wasn't a particularly forward-thinking design, being half obsolete by the middle of World War II. There wasn't anything coming to replace it until the US got the legendary M24 Chaffee, though, so it saw quite a bit of use. Let's fast forward to the Cold War era, to the 1970s. That's when the Soviet T-72, the most produced second-generation MBT in the world, made its official debut. What Soviet engineers wanted was basically a redesigned T-64 that would be both rugged and dependable, and they managed to make exactly that. For quite some time, the T-72 was the tank when it came to getting the best bang for your buck, or ruble in this case, and around 30,000 of those were made. By the way, it's still in service in many countries, from Russia to India and Finland. It's time for the big league. The third most produced tank in history is the M4 Sherman, the staple of the American Army during World War II. Any combat scenario, any theater of operations, the Sherman killed it, remaining an effective counter to German armor right up to the end of the World War. It was pretty affordable too. All in all, around 50,000 of those beauties were made, including Lend-Lease Shermans used by the USSR and other Allied nations. In second place, we have a truly legendary vehicle, the Soviet T-34 Medium tank. Great performance, easy to ship, and relatively cheap to produce. During the war, T-34 tanks were manufactured all around the Union, and after the war, under license, its production was restarted in many countries of the Soviet bloc. If we throw in the T-34-85 variation, there were more than 65,000 tanks made. A very impressive figure, to say the least. Finally, we get to the most produced tank ever. It also hails from the Soviet Union. We're talking about the T-54, obviously. It was approved for mass production a few years after the end of World War II, meaning that it incorporated all the experience gained during the war. As a result, It was a vehicle with an excellent armor arrangement and a powerful 100mm gun, which was also just as easy to build and maintain as the legendary T34. Counting all the variants, like the Chinese Type 59, around 70,000 of those tanks were built throughout the years. Can't compete with that. Every vehicle mentioned on the list played a very important role in their respective armies. Yeah, you could say that they were just workhorses. Yes, they weren't big on innovation and were no mechanical marvels most of the time, but every single one of them is still remembered and respected almost half a century later. What are your favorite, most produced vehicles? Have you ever seen them in real life? Or at a festival? Or maybe displayed in a museum? Please tell us in the comments below.